Continuing on with Educator.com's reading a book, we're going to learn about X-raying a book. It's probably going to be one of the more interesting lectures and one that's going to have an interesting assignment at the end, so pay close attention. So let's go over the lessons. First off, what is an X-ray of the book? Bet if you think really hard, you can probably guess where I'm going to go with that. Then we're going to learn about two things. We're going to learn about the whole and the parts. And finally, we're going to learn about the organization. And then when we put it all together, we understand the unity of a book. What is an X-ray? Here it is, right here. This is a skeleton of a written essay, a 5-paragraph essay that you are already familiar with. So, we have the introduction, which contains the thesis. We have the body paragraphs, which contain body paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. And finally, we have the conclusion, where you're sure that you're going to restate the thesis. If you've done the 5-paragraph essay on Educator.com or in school, you've seen this before, you understand what this is. This is an outline. An outline is a skeleton of a book. Now, a book's skeleton is much more complicated than a 5-paragraph essay, which is why we're going to be going over this a lot more slowly to understand exactly how we can put this all together. So, when we're looking at the skeleton of a book, we have to answer a couple questions first. So, first off, we need to know what is the book about as a whole. And then we have to understand what are the particular parts of a book. And then we have to understand how are these parts organized into the whole. When we do that X-ray, we understand the unity of the book. I mean, if I could give you a crude illustration, it'd be something like this. Here's the whole, and then we're going to divide that into parts, and then we're going to discover how each of these parts relate to each other, and how they're organized, and why they're presented in such a way. If you get that, you understand what the unity of a book is, and you can kind of, well, understand a book better from there. Here is an example of one of the books that I've mentioned before. It's this one. This is your Brain on Music. Here is the whole and the parts for Brain on Music. This is on your Brain on Music is about the neurological effects of music on the brain. It covers why music is important to people, why it is culturally universal, and how it is hardwired into our brain. The author explains how early music lessons can last until adulthood. So, as you can see here, stating the whole of a book is going to be stated in a few sentences, and maybe we'll divide things up into a little bit of parts, but we're basically talking about this right here. You're really clever, you can get the whole of a book down to 1 or 2 sentences, and the rest will be just kind of parts. So, let's continue on with another example. This book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So, how are we going to state the whole of this book? This famous book is all about working with and getting to know people. It surveys several habits that make people likable and charismatic. His aim is to help people succeed in any social setting. Where's the whole? Probably just that first sentence again. It's all about working with and getting to know people. Maybe you could phrase that a little bit better. It's about also influencing people and getting along with people and enjoying people and making friends. There's a lot of things you could say or rephrase that, but that's kind of what the whole of the book is about. So, how do we understand what the whole is? Just think of it as a major theme or thesis of the entire book condensed in 1 or a few sentences. Like I said, if you're really good, you can get it down to 1. But there are many books that just can't be stated in 1 simple thesis. There's a reason why I did not choose Structure of Scientific Revolutions for my example here. Now, how do we figure out what the whole is? Well, that's actually really easy. You can do that by skimming and or pre-reading. When I say pre-reading, I really do just mean skimming. You know, I'm just going to flip through this book, kind of look at the chapter headings, look at this right here, look at page numbers, maybe read a preface. I'm going to judge the book by its cover. That's definitely going to tell me what the whole of the book is about in both cases. And remember, we got the back panel too, so you can look at that. We need to be precise when we're stating the whole. because if you start listing off many, many things that the book is about, you're starting to get into parts. So remember, we're trying to get down to one sentence if we can, 2 or 3 at the most. The author's preface will help you, and it will probably give you what the whole is right away, and it'll even give you a little bit of hint of the parts. And yes, if you really do want to understand the whole of the book, you will eventually have to read the entire thing. I'm only saying that because maybe the author set out to do something, but as you read the book, you kind of realize he didn't quite hit the mark, and maybe the book is better stated than what the author said it was going to be about in the beginning. Happens all the time. I'm not kidding. Now we're going to divide this whole into several parts, and we're also going to pay attention to how it's organized. So let's go with How to Win Friends and Influence People again. How to Win Friends is divided into 4 separate parts. The first covers the fundamentals of people skills. The second contains chapters on how to make people like you. The third on how to win people to your way of thinking. And finally, the fourth is how to change others, correct mistakes, and to lead. This Is Your Brain on Music defines terms like pitch, timbre, and the more familiar rhythm. It also describes how music affects parts of our reptilian brain, and there are also sections on how we categorize music. The author also argues what makes a musician, neurologically speaking. So as you can see, which book do you think is more easily organized and more easy to understand? I'd actually say probably this one, because I can already tell you it's divided up into 4 parts, and each one of those is covered. This one, when we look at the table of contents, we kind of have like one subject, another subject, but they're not divided up into 4 parts. So this one is a little bit harder to categorize and organize than this book here. Now, how do we divide into parts? First off, table of contents is one of the best places for you to help you understand this. This book was divided into 4 parts. This book was just divided up into chapters, but I do have a better idea of the organization of both from each one. You really want to outline properly. Yes, you will read and you will annotate each chapter. And after you read and you annotate each chapter, you will go crazy and outline each chapter. I do mean you actually will write out one Roman numeral here, and then you maybe write down the thesis of the chapter, and then you would maybe type out again, you'd type out another point here, A, B, and C, and then maybe go to the next section of the chapter, and so on and so on. You would probably outline that and type it out. Now, does that sound like too much reading and too much work? Well, I could definitely see how that would sound like a lot of work, and you've probably never read a book and outlined everything before. And that's okay, because once you've done it a few times, it becomes something habitual and something that you can just do in your head, and you wouldn't have to actually write out the outline or type out the outline every single time. It's a great exercise for the first couple times you do it, but you don't have to do it all the time when you're reading nonfiction. Otherwise, reading books would just take forever. So, when you're doing this outlining, you need to first understand what the whole is. Got to have a feel for what the entire book is about before you can start talking about parts and the organization of the parts. Pay close attention to how the author divides up the book. They've split up the book into parts and organizations for a specific reason, and they probably spent a lot of time doing it that way. Read through the book and pay attention to any details that are repeated over and over and over again. That's probably a major point and probably something that you're going to want to pay attention to in your outline. Consider why details are put in a specific order. Remember, sometimes if somebody's giving you an argument, they'll give you their conclusion followed by their reasons. But other times they'll give you a long list of details first and then hope that you agree with their conclusion, which they'll tell you at the end. If the author has a main point, an overarching theme, you have to pay attention to how the author argues for that. And later, in the next couple sections, we're going to be going over how to understand that in detail. But the most important rule when you actually write out an outline for a book or even a chapter book is rule number 6. You will never have a perfect outline. You will never have a perfect outline. Now, why am I saying that? Because sometimes when we outline books, we want to go into more details, and kind of get things as divided up into parsed out and as organized as we possibly can. Don't do that. There is no right outline. There is no perfect outline. There are some that are better than others, and some that will be closer to the author's original intentions, but don't expect to come up with an outline and have it look just like what the author would have expected you to come out with. Remember, we're all imperfect people, and all writing is actually imperfect. You're not always going to get things right on. But outline enough so that you kind of understand how everything's organized, and I'll show you how detailed you should go in the examples later. So, your assignment is to do this. On educator.com, I have a section from the Declaration of Independence. Read that. Then, look at the outline that is supplied. That will give you an idea of about how detailed you should go when you're reading. Then, when you're writing your outline, when you're making it yourself, pick just one chapter from a nonfiction book that you're reading. And then go ahead and outline it on your notebook or type it up in your piece of paper, and then that will help you understand how to outline in your head later, and so you don't have to do this every single time whenever you're reading. If one time isn't enough to help you, go ahead and do another chapter or do a third chapter. Just don't do the preface. That doesn't count. Till then, thanks for using Educator.